Alexa first saw her own face, rendered in ochre and charcoal, on the wall of a cave in the Dordogne Valley. She was a doctoral student in archaeology at the time, part of a team excavating a newly discovered Magdalenian-era site. The figure was a stick-thin huntress, spear in hand, but the face, turned in three-quarter profile, was unmistakably hers. The same high cheekbones, the same slightly upturned nose, the same wide-set eyes that stared back at her from the mirror every morning. Her colleagues had laughed it off as a remarkable coincidence, a trick of pareidolia. "You're just seeing things, Alexa," her supervising professor, Dr. Albright, had said, patting her on the shoulder. "Facial recognition is hardwired into our brains. We see faces in clouds, in toast, in prehistoric cave paintings." She had tried to believe him. She wrote it off as a fluke, a funny story to tell at parties. But the image of the huntress with her face haunted her dreams. She named her Brenda, a name that felt both familiar and foreign, a whisper from a half-remembered dream. Years passed. Alexa became Dr. Thorne, a respected historian specializing in ancient cultures. She traveled the world, deciphering forgotten languages and unearthing lost histories. And everywhere she went, she found Brenda. In the tomb of an Egyptian noblewoman, she found a canopic jar with a lid carved in her likeness. The hieroglyphs identified the deceased as Brenda, the beloved of Horus. In a Roman villa in Pompeii, a mosaic depicted a priestess with Alexa's face, her name inscribed in the tiles. Brenda, keeper of the flame. In a Viking burial mound in Norway, she unearthed a silver locket engraved with a woman's portrait, a woman who could have been her twin, and the runic inscription read, "Brenda, the Shield Maiden." Each discovery was a fresh jolt, a new crack in the foundation of her carefully constructed reality. She kept her findings to herself, a secret collection of impossible artifacts. She was a woman of science, of logic and reason. But the evidence was mounting, and it pointed to a conclusion that was anything but logical. She was not the first, she was not the only one. Her research took on a new urgency. She pored over ancient texts, searching for any mention of a woman named Brenda, a woman with her face. She found scattered references, whispers in the margins of history. A Brenda who was a philosopher in ancient Greece, a Brenda who was a pirate queen in the Caribbean, a Brenda who was a codebreaker at Bletchley Park. Each Brenda had lived a full life, a life of her own. They were not just images, they were individuals, each with their own stories, their own triumphs and tragedies. And yet they were all connected, all bound together by a face that was not their own, a face that was Alexa's. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place in a most unexpected way. She was in Tokyo, giving a lecture on the Jomon period, when she was approached by a representative from a tech corporation, a company that was at the forefront of holographic technology. They had been working on a new project, a holographic archive of human history, and they wanted her expertise. As they showed her a demonstration, a holographic projection of a futuristic city, a figure walked out of the shimmering light. It was a woman clad in a silver jumpsuit, her hair cut in a sharp, geometric style. And her face was Alexa's. The nameplate on the holographic display read, "Brenda 7.3 Chrononaut." Alexa felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't just the past anymore, it was the future. Brenda was not just a historical anomaly. She was a recurring pattern, a thread woven into the very fabric of time. That night, as she stared out at the neon-drenched skyline of Tokyo, a strange sensation washed over her. A pulling, a tugging, as if a giant, invisible hand was reaching out to her from across the world, from across time. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, but she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was not the only one feeling it. Around the world, in different times and different places, other women were feeling the same pull. A warrior in a Celtic village, an artist in Renaissance Florence, a soldier in a dystopian future. They were all different, all unique, but they all shared the same face, the same name, the same inexplicable destiny. They were all Brenda, and they were all being drawn together to a single point, a single moment in time. A moment of reckoning, a moment when they would finally have to confront the truth of their existence and decide which version of Brenda would survive. The pull was a physical sensation, a knot of energy in the pit of her stomach that grew tighter with each passing day. It was a compass needle, tugging her towards an unknown destination. Alexa, a woman of logic and reason, found herself booking a flight to a remote, uninhabited island in the South Pacific, a place she had only seen on satellite maps, a place that was, for no discernible reason, calling to her. She wasn't the only one. In a mud brick village in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, A young woman named Bren, her face adorned with the same features as Alexa's, felt the same pull. She was a shaman, a healer, a keeper of ancient traditions. Her people had lived in isolation for centuries, their culture untouched by the outside world. But now, a force stronger than any tradition was pulling her away from her home, towards a destiny she could not yet comprehend. In a neon-drenched, cyberpunk city of the 23rd century, a cybernetically enhanced assassin known only as Brenda X felt the pull as a glitch in her programming, a ghost in the machine. She was a weapon, a tool of a shadowy corporation, her body a fusion of flesh and steel. But the pull was something that transcended technology, a call from a place beyond the reach of her digital world. They came from all corners of history, from all possible futures. A Brenda who was a stoic Roman legionary, a Brenda who was a graceful geisha in feudal Japan, a Brenda who was a renegade pilot in a galactic civil war. They were all different, all shaped by the times and places they had lived in. But they were all being drawn to the same place, the same moment. The island was a speck of volcanic rock in the middle of the ocean, a place that had never known human habitation. But as Alexa's small plane touched down on a makeshift runway, she saw that she was not the first to arrive. A small group of women was gathered on the beach, their faces a gallery of familiar strangers. There was the Amazonian shaman, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. There was the cybernetic assassin, her metallic limbs glinting in the tropical sun. There was the Roman legionary, her armor a stark anachronism against the lush green of the jungle. There were others, too. A woman in the robes of a medieval nun, a woman in the tattered uniform of a World War I nurse, a woman in the shimmering, form-fitting jumpsuit of a deep space explorer. They were all her, and she was all of them. They were all Brenda. There was no need for introductions. They knew each other not by name but by a deeper, more primal connection. They were all pieces of the same puzzle, fragments of the same soul, scattered across the tapestry of time. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the beach, a figure emerged from the jungle. She was older than the others, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes filled with a wisdom that seemed to span millennia. She was dressed in the simple, homespun clothes of a peasant, but she carried herself with the authority of a queen. "I am Brenda," she said, her voice a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. "The first Brenda, the one from whom all of you are echoes." She told them a story that began in a time before time, in a place beyond the confines of their understanding. She spoke of a being of pure energy, a being that had existed for eons, a being that had grown lonely in its solitude. In a moment of cosmic curiosity, it had decided to experience life, to taste the joys and sorrows of mortality. It had fractured itself, scattering its essence across the timeline of a small, insignificant planet called Earth. "We are all fragments of that being," the first Brenda explained. "Each of us a different facet of its personality, a different expression of its consciousness. We have lived countless lives, experienced countless worlds. But now the time has come for us to become whole again." She pointed to the sky, where a strange, new star was beginning to burn, a star that was not on any of their celestial charts. "The convergence is upon us," she said. "The moment when all the scattered fragments of our being will be drawn back together. But there is a problem. The vessel can only hold one. Only one Brenda can survive the convergence. The rest of us will be erased." The first Brenda's words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Erased. The word echoed in their minds, a death sentence for all but one of them. They looked at each other, at the faces that were their own, and yet not their own. They saw the fear, the anger, the desperation. They were all survivors, all fighters. They had all clawed their way through their own personal hells to get to this point. And now they were being asked to sacrifice themselves for a stranger who wore their face. "This is insane," Brenda X, the assassin, said, her voice a metallic rasp. "I will not be erased. I will not be a footnote in someone else's story. The gods have willed it," the Roman legionary said, her hand resting on the hilt of her gladius. "It is a matter of honor, a test of our strength. There must be another way," Alexa said, her voice trembling. "We are all individuals. We all have a right to exist." The first Brenda shook her head. "There is no other way. The universe demands balance. The being must be made whole, and only one of us can be the vessel." She explained the rules of the convergence. It was not a battle of strength, not a contest of wills. It was a choice. Each of them had to choose which Brenda they believed was the most worthy of survival, the one who best embodied the spirit of the original being. The one who received the most votes would be the one to survive. You must look into each other's hearts, the first Brenda said. You must see the lives they have lived, the choices they have made. You must decide who among you is the most deserving of a future. And so they began. They sat in a circle on the beach, the strange new star casting an eerie glow upon their faces. They opened their minds to each other, sharing their memories, their hopes, their fears. They saw the world through each other's eyes, lived each other's lives. Alexa saw the Amazonian shaman's deep connection to the natural world, her profound understanding of the delicate balance of life and death. She saw the Roman legionary's unwavering courage, her fierce loyalty to her comrades, her unshakable sense of duty. She saw the cybernetic assassin's cold, calculating precision, her ruthless efficiency, her hidden core of pain and regret. She saw the geisha's exquisite artistry, her mastery of the subtle language of beauty and grace. She saw the renegade pilot's reckless bravery, her passionate love of freedom, her unyielding defiance of tyranny. She saw the medieval nun's quiet faith, her selfless devotion to the poor and the sick, her unwavering belief in the power of compassion. Each life was a universe unto itself, a rich and complex tapestry of joy and sorrow, of triumph and tragedy. Each Brenda was a hero in her own right, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. How could she choose between them? How could she condemn all but one of them to oblivion? As the night wore on, the weight of the decision began to crush them. They argued, they pleaded, they wept. They each made a case for their own survival, for the importance of their own existence. But they also began to see the value in each other's lives, the beauty in their differences. It was Alexa who finally broke the stalemate. She had spent her life studying the past, piecing together the fragments of history. She had always been an observer, a chronicler, a keeper of stories. She had never been a hero, a warrior, a leader. But now she realized that her role was just as important as theirs. I choose, all of us, she said, her voice clear and strong. I choose to believe that we are more than just fragments of a forgotten being. We are individuals with our own lives, our own stories, and we all deserve to exist. Her words were met with a stunned silence. The other Brendas looked at her, their faces a mixture of confusion and hope. The first Brenda's expression was unreadable. That is not the choice, the first Brenda said, her voice flat. You must choose one. No, Alexa said, standing up. I refuse to choose. I refuse to be a part of this cosmic game. If the universe demands a sacrifice, then let it take me, but I will not be the one to erase my sisters. One by one, the other Brendas stood up, their voices joining Alexa's in a chorus of defiance. They had all lived different lives, but they had all come to the same conclusion. They would not sacrifice each other. They would stand together or they would fall together. The first Brenda looked at them, a slow smile spreading across her wrinkled face. I have waited a long time for this, she said, for the day when you would all finally understand. She explained that the convergence was not about erasure, it was about integration. It was not about choosing one Brenda to survive, but about all of them becoming one. The vessel was not a single body, but a single consciousness, a fusion of all their memories, all their experiences, all their strengths. The being did not fracture itself out of loneliness, she said. It fractured itself to learn, to grow, to evolve. It wanted to experience the universe from every possible perspective, to understand the infinite variety of life. And now it is time for it to come back together, not as a single monolithic being, but as a new kind of consciousness, a being that is both one and many. The new star in the sky began to pulse, its light growing brighter and brighter. The Brendas joined hands, their bodies beginning to shimmer and fade. They were no longer separate individuals, but a single unified being of light and energy. They were Alexa, the historian, and Bren, the shaman, and Brenda X, the assassin. They were the Roman legionary, the geisha, the pilot, the nun. They were all of them, and they were none of them. They were a new being, a being that had lived 1,000 lives, a being that had seen the dawn of creation and the end of time. They were a being of infinite compassion, of boundless courage, of unshakable wisdom. They were a being that was ready to take its place in the cosmos, not as a god, but as a guardian, a protector, a keeper of stories. As the light faded, the island was empty once more. The makeshift runway was gone, the footprints on the beach washed away by the tide. It was as if the Brendas had never been there at all, but they were there. They were everywhere. They were in the rustle of the leaves, in the crash of the waves, in the light of the stars. They were a part of the universe, and the universe was a part of them. And in a small, dusty office in a university in England, a book appeared on a shelf, a book that had not been there a moment before. It was a thick, leather-bound volume. its pages filled with a story that was both ancient and new, a story of a woman who had found her face in ancient ruins and had discovered that she was not the first and that she was not the only one. The title of the book was Brenda, and its author was all of them. The book's appearance was a quiet miracle, a subtle ripple in the fabric of reality. To the world, it was just another scholarly work, a curiosity for historians and archaeologists. But to those who were receptive, to those whose minds were open to the whispers of the universe, it was a revelation. A young girl in a remote village in India who dreamed of flying to the stars found the book in a dusty corner of her school library. As she read, she felt a surge of courage, a belief in her own potential that she had never known before. She would go on to become a renowned astrophysicist, a pioneer in the exploration of deep space, her life a testament to the renegade pilot's love of freedom. A jaded politician in a sprawling metropolis who had lost his way in the corridors of power stumbled upon the book in a second-hand bookstore. The story of the medieval nun's selfless compassion rekindled a spark of idealism in his cynical heart. He would go on to champion the cause of the poor and the marginalized, his life a testament to the power of empathy. A soldier on a futuristic battlefield who had known nothing but violence and destruction found a digital copy of the book on a discarded datapad. The story of the Roman legionary's unwavering sense of duty, tempered by the geisha's appreciation for beauty, gave him a new perspective on his own life. He would go on to become a peacemaker, a builder of bridges, his life a testament to the idea that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to create. The legacy of the Brendas was not a grand, sweeping change, but a series of small, personal transformations. It was a ripple effect, a chain reaction of hope and inspiration that spread throughout the world, throughout time. The new being, the integrated consciousness of all the Brendas, did not interfere in the affairs of humanity. It did not perform miracles or smite the wicked or reveal the secrets of the universe. It simply was. It was a silent observer, a gentle guardian, a keeper of stories. It was a reminder that every life has value, that every story is worth telling, that every one of us is a part of something larger than ourselves. And so, the story of Brenda, the woman with 1,000 faces, became a legend, a myth, a whisper in the wind. It was a story that was told and retold in 1,000 different languages in 1,000 different worlds. It was a story that would never end, because it was a story that was still being written every day in the hearts and minds of all who dared to dream of a better world. Alexa, the historian, would have been pleased. She had spent her life searching for the truth, for the story that would explain everything. And in the end, she had become the story. She had become a part of the truth, and her face, the face that had launched 1,000 lives, would forever be a symbol of the infinite potential that lies within each and every one of us. Years after the convergence, the Book of Brenda had become a cultural touchstone, a source of inspiration for millions. But for a select few, it was something more. It was a key, a clue, a map to a deeper mystery. In a quiet corner of the internet, a community began to form. They were a diverse group, a collection of misfits and dreamers, of scientists and artists, of historians and futurists. They were drawn together by a shared experience, a strange sense of recognition when they looked at certain faces, a feeling that they had seen them before in other times in other places. They called themselves the Echoes. They were the ones who had noticed the other recurring faces, the other patterns in the tapestry of time. They had seen the face of a man with a crooked smile and a mischievous glint in his eye, a face that had appeared on a wanted poster in the Old West, in a photograph of a jazz musician in the 1920s, in a news report about a charismatic cult leader in the 21st century. They had seen the face of a woman with sad, soulful eyes, a face that had been captured in a Renaissance portrait, in a daguerreotype of a Civil War nurse, in a holographic advertisement for a brand of synthetic tears. Led by a brilliant but eccentric computer scientist who called himself Kaito, the Echoes began to compile a database of these recurring faces, these travelers who seemed to be woven into the fabric of history. They used facial recognition software, genealogical records, historical archives, and even the esoteric arts of divination and remote viewing to track their appearances across time. They discovered that the travelers were not just human. They found the face of a golden retriever that had been the loyal companion of a Roman emperor, the beloved pet of a Victorian poet, and the first dog on Mars. They found the image of a gnarled, ancient oak tree that had stood on a windswept hill for 1,000 years, a silent witness to the rise and fall of civilizations. Kaido, a man who had always felt like an outsider, like he was living in the wrong time, became obsessed with the travelers. He believed that they were the key to understanding the true nature of reality, the secret history of the universe. He developed a theory, a wild, audacious theory that was part science, part mysticism. He believed that the travelers were not just echoes, not just fragments of a single being. He believed that they were all connected, all part of a vast, cosmic network of consciousness, a web of life that stretched across all of time and space. He believed that the convergence of the Brendas was not the end of the story, but the beginning. It was the first time that a group of travelers had become self-aware, the first time that they had consciously chosen to integrate their consciousness. Kaido's theory was dismissed by the mainstream scientific community as pure fantasy, but the echoes believed him. They had all felt the pull, the connection, the sense of belonging to something larger than themselves. They had all seen the patterns, the synchronicities, the strange, inexplicable coincidences that seemed to follow the travelers wherever they went. They began to see their own faces in the database, to recognize themselves as travelers. They were not as prolific as the Brendas, not as dramatic as the man with the crooked smile. They were the quiet ones, the background characters, the extras in the grand drama of history, but they were there. They were a part of the network. And as they delved deeper into the mystery, they began to realize that they were not just observers. They were participants. They were all, in their own small way, shaping the course of history, influencing the flow of time. They were all a part of the story. The Book of Brenda had been a catalyst, a spark that had ignited a new kind of consciousness, a new kind of awareness. It had opened the door to a larger world, a world of infinite possibilities, of endless connections, of a universe that was far more strange and beautiful than they had ever imagined. The echoes were the next chapter in the story, the next wave of travelers to awaken. They were the proof that the legacy of the Brendas was not just a story, but a living, breathing reality. They were the hope for a future where all beings, great and small, would recognize their connection to each other, their place in the grand, cosmic dance of life. And so, the story continues. The search for the travelers, for the echoes of the past and the whispers of the future goes on. The mystery deepens, the network grows, the story unfolds. And in the heart of it all, there is a single, simple truth. We are all connected. We are all travelers. We are all a part of the story. Among the echoes, there was one who was different. Her name was Alara, and she was a young woman with a quiet demeanor and a sharp, analytical mind. She was a linguist, a student of dead languages, a decipherer of forgotten scripts. She had been drawn to the echoes by her discovery of a recurring symbol, a strange, elegant glyph that seemed to appear in the most unlikely of places. She had found it carved into the wall of a Neolithic tomb in Ireland, woven into the tapestry of a Mayan queen, and scrawled in the margins of a medieval alchemist's notebook. It was a symbol that had no known meaning, no place in any recorded language. But it was always there, a silent companion to the travelers, a secret signature hidden in the pages of history. Alara's research into the glyph led her to Kaido and the echoes. She shared her findings with them, and they were astounded. They had been so focused on the faces, on the human element of the travelers, that they had missed the more subtle clues, the hidden messages that were woven into the fabric of their existence. Kaido, with his expertise in computer science and cryptography, began to analyze the glyph. He treated it as a code, a cipher, a message from an unknown intelligence. He ran it through every decryption algorithm he could think of, but it resisted all his attempts to unlock its secrets. It was Alara, with her deep understanding of the structure and evolution of language, who finally made the breakthrough. She realized that the glyph was not a code to be broken, but a language to be learned. It was a visual language, a language of symbols and archetypes, a language that spoke directly to the subconscious mind. She began to see the glyph not as a single, static symbol, but as a dynamic, evolving entity. It changed over time, its form shifting and adapting to the culture and the context in which it appeared. It was a living language, a language that was constantly growing and changing, just like the travelers themselves. As Alara immersed herself in the language of the glyph, she began to have strange dreams, visions of other times, other places. She saw the world through the eyes of the travelers, felt their joys and their sorrows, their hopes and their fears. She began to understand the deeper meaning behind their journeys, the purpose of their endless wanderings. She saw that the travelers were not just passive observers, not just echoes of a forgotten being. They were active participants in the evolution of consciousness, the agents of a cosmic plan. They were the weavers of the web, the singers of the song, the dreamers of the dream. And the glyph, she realized, was their tool. It was a way of encoding information, of transmitting knowledge, of shaping reality. It was a way of communicating with the universe, of speaking the language of creation itself. Ilara's discovery was a paradigm shift for the Echoes. It transformed their understanding of the travelers, of themselves, of the very nature of existence. They were not just a collection of lonely individuals, but a community of co-creators, a family of kindred spirits, a chorus of voices singing the same song. They began to learn the language of the glyph, to use it to communicate with each other, to share their dreams and their visions, to weave their own stories into the tapestry of time. They became more than just echoes. They became the first echo, the first generation of travelers to consciously and collectively embrace their role as co-creators of the universe. And as they did, they began to see the world in a new light. They saw the beauty in the chaos, the order in the randomness, the love in the heart of it all. They saw that the universe was not a cold, empty place, but a warm, vibrant, and intelligent being, a being that was constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly evolving. They were a part of that being, and that being was a part of them. They were home. The story of the Brendas had been the prologue. The story of the Echoes was the first chapter, and the story of the first Echo was the beginning of a new book, a book that was still being written, a book that would have no end. For the story of life, of consciousness, of the universe itself, is a story that is always unfolding, always beginning, always new. And we are all its authors.